A very good evening to everyone. I, Ankita Sharma, Student Manager, Balaji Institute of International Business, feels privileged to introduce Mr. Rohit Bhagat, a qualified engineer and an MBA HR from SCM HRD with exhaustive experience across the government of HR functions in diverse sectors of insurance, metal, corporate HR, power, textile, consumer goods, outsourcing, ITES and consulting across India, Africa, US and Southeast Asia. His rich and varied expertise encompasses people strategy and business integration, OG and talent management, strategic and mass recruitment, employee engagement, change management, leadership development, job analysis and JDs, performance management, multi-level and multi-geographic talent acquisition, manpower planning and structuring, global office management, new business planning, organization effectiveness and HR consulting. Sir has worked with Aditya Birla Group, Ernst & Young, Patni and DCM Shriram, HL Africa, and now heading HR Corporate Communication and Shared Services for a US-based consulting, technology and outsourcing firm. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankita. I would like to call upon Naveen Agarwal,
Balaji Institute of International Business, to introduce Mr. Trinath M.
Good evening, everyone. It's my honor and privilege to introduce to you Mr. Trinath M. Mr. Trinath M is Senior Vice President HR in Newsome Industry Limited, CK Birla Group, Pune, covering 3 manufacturing locations. His scholastic achievements are BA in IR and PM University topper from Andhra University, MSW in IR and PM 5th ranker from Andhra University, MA in Sociology from Andhra University, Bachelor of Laws, Andhra University, Diploma in Labor Laws and Administrative Laws, Annamalai University, and pursuing PhD program on Performance Management System. To highlight his rich professional experience, Sir began his career in 1985 with the jute industry in Andhra Pradesh as head of personnel department in 3 companies with huge manpower up to 6,000 manpower in complex industrial relation environment. Sir later on moved to iron and steel industry in Sindhudurg district of Maharashtra as AGM HR and IR from 1995 to 1997. He, for a short while, worked in cement industry for 7 months in Naxal-affected areas in Andhra Pradesh. He also worked in Sinar Pulp and Paper in India near Baramati, Maharashtra as DGM People Development for 6 years from 1997 to 2003. He served as Regional Head HR for 8 states and a manufacturing plant at Visakhapatnam for Coromandel Fertilizers for 3.5 years. Sir held a corporate role as General Manager HR in MRF Limited, Chennai, taking care of 9 manufacturing locations with 27,000 manpower and 180 HR team members for 5 years from 2007 to 2011. During his 27 years of tenure in independent capacity, although he has seen the personal function transformation from hardcore IR to ER and to HR and led the journey with challenging situations, transformational experiments, excitement, failures and accomplishment. He got the opportunity to work with diverse culture and literacy levels of people ranging from 1,000 to 27,000 in jute, iron and steel, cement, paper, fertilizers, tire and auto component industries. Sir very strongly believes in professional ethics and like challenges at workplace, professional networking and learning experiment new concepts. Lastly, he has liking to interact and learn from college students. Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and privilege for me to call upon Dr. Shekhar Naik to carry forward the discussion.
Well, I guess I was not heard properly. I said, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, that's good. I see all of you are wide awake, and it's probably very apt that just before we go into this session, we had Nitin doing the session on healthcare. Because going by what the topic is and what most of us are going to face over the next few years, healthcare, you will realize, will become a very important item on your agenda. In fact, I think you will have to have it calendared at least as a once in a 6-month event, so that you go and get yourself a comprehensive healthcare if you really want to be in shape, both mentally and physically. You've already been introduced to the very two eminent speakers for the afternoon, the panelists. I don't think I want to really add any more, but I also don't want to take up any more of your time. So may I now request Mr. Srinath to start off. He has all the background to be talking on a topic like the one we have today, which is in the current uncertain political scenario. Given its vicissitudes, enterprise managers and particularly the HR function will face new and unknown challenges. The operative words, I guess, are vicissitudes, which is really change, known and unknown, and new and unknown challenges. So, Srinath, if you'll take over.
Good afternoon once again. First of all, it's my proud privilege to be with a very huge gathering, one of the rarest, the charmiest of the cream of India, the next generations who are going to take the baton from all of us. The topic is very apt. To be very frank, I have no clue as to what the panel discussion would be today. Only a couple of days back, I was informed that there will be a panel discussion. Initially, I was told that I had to address some topic, and I was ready for that. That was on nothing other than the PhD program which I am doing myself. I had something for that. I had something to offer you that. Okay, I'll take some other opportunity to give benefit of that. Now, coming to this topic, it is quite a generic topic. I don't know whether I can really put forth many valuable thoughts on the subject. Nevertheless, I give my own view about this. Please don't take my words as any criticism to any political party or anything to the nation. But today's situation is really very alarming. We have a government, UPA government in the center, which is a coalition government. It's not a single party rule. They are dependent upon so many partners, political partners. Naturally, it's a weak government. It suffers from policy paralysis. I do not know how many of you agree. I clearly see that, which is evident in the last few years. Government is somehow trying to survive itself with the political alliances just to keep going, not to work on their own ideologies with totally contrast of ideologies of political parties. They are still working out of compulsion, but they don't have heart in it. If you look at what is happening in this last few years, there's no policy decisions being taken, neither any existing policies which are requiring change or modification are being taken up. One side, the global economies are very, very wary. Never we have seen this sort of turbulence in the global economy. Take the Greece case, take the Euro issue, take American recession, take anything. What's happening in Europe and America, all these things are really worrying, and no one has a real solution. Unfortunately, at this point of time, we are facing this sort of things. The oil is one of the biggest worries in the global economy today. So in this sort of situations, actually what is called for is a very robust, courageous government which can take us through the turbulent times. and we are exactly on the other side. What's the result? The result is economic stalemate. We are in a standstill situation. Although we boast of 7%, 8% economic growth in the last 2 years, we know in the last quarter we are at 5.5 of GDP. And we really do not know the real situation, and the coming days are going to be further gloomy. The political paradoxical global scenario, extraordinary inflation, fall of GDP, and all these kind of things are of highest concern to us today. And this time, we are now listening about political fallout. The government can fall. In the last week only, there was a major threat, and fortunately, this time, we heard of some solace, Mulayam Singh coming forward and probably offering an olive branch. Government probably survives this time. But what's the guarantee that it will not repeat? What's the guarantee Mulayam Singh himself withdraws one day, or any other political alliance today in UPA cannot come down? So we are not sure whether this government will survive the whole term. For a moment, assuming that midterm election comes, can we guarantee that a single largest party can come in this situation? Most unlikely. And I'm sure my own personal assessment is that for sure, no. Again, another coalition government only can come into. This is the kind of scenario we are in. Now, what it is making sense to the economy? Let's forget about politics, government, all these things. That's the state of affairs today, politically. But now coming to what it is making good and bad to our economy, where we are all living upon. No single sector, whether it is manufacturing, IT, service sector, infrastructure, FMCG, you name anything, no one is doing well, no one is comfortable. There may be some windfall gains they are making, but no one is able to really sustain the business, and they don't have a clear direction. Totally, the future is unpredictable. Unprecedented challenges are on hand without knowing who will solve these problems. Policy paralysis is killing our economy. GDP growth is going down and down. The employment market is the worst hit. Stock market crumbled. Investor confidence is lost. And if we see, there is no near solution at our site. Very frightening situation with both challenges from global and local side. It's not only internal problems are inside the India, outside India problems are also pulling India. There's no investments coming in. Even the existing businesses and investments are moving away. There is an undeclared economic recession prevailing in India today. Countries like China, with their communist ideologies and other things, are taking advantage of this situation, and they are grabbing the market share in the global economy. Regression is taking place in our economy, and we do not know how much time it takes for us to come back to the own rails and then again set our path forward for growth. This is the macro picture I see, the impact of this political uncertainty on our economy. Now, let's talk something about a HR dimension. What is the HR dimension of this scenario? The economy is nothing but people. The people's state of living, how well they are living, how is what it is all about economy. Otherwise, we are not bothered about economy. Why should we bother? So economy is nothing but people. Obviously, when economy itself is in doldrums, how can we expect people to be happy? People are the worst hit, be it in organized sector or it is an unorganized sector. There is no new job hirings, first of all. The bad news is that very, very, very poor hirings. There may be few pockets, I'm not denying that, but we cannot count upon it. There's no changes of jobs also. and people are trying to stick to their jobs for fear of loss of employment. Even for lower salaries, no increase in salaries, people are ready to work today. The top-notch people are prepared to work just with that. Where there is no moments, fear of risk. Now coming to your context, campuses are the worst hit in this scenario. Already we are seeing this year campus seems to be very, very gloomy. What happens to the people? Only the brightest of the people amongst the campuses may get some opportunities. What about the people with average intelligence and caliber? Their dreams are all shattered. This is the kind of impact this scenario poses a threat to all of us. If this kind of scenario continues for a few more months, I fear that job cuts may further come into play. What it will impact in terms of HR dimension, we see is that companies will start cutting way of doing to another way of doing it. The current scenario, if it continues, will lead to underselling of human talent, and talent growth will be retarded. It gives multi-dimensional human problems of employment, industrial unrest, and ultimately increase in poverty levels. This is a broad spectrum of HR dimension of this economic impact due to the political uncertainty, these things. Now, talking specifics to what actually in HR function, within HR function, what happens and what HR functions, how the HR function will react to this situation in terms of clear-cut actions. Clear-cut actions I see is that HR function will face all the above associated problems, and it will come out with a customized HR model now. A new model will emerge. What we are doing today, all this last 1 or 2 or 3 decades, we will do differently because it's a new times are calling for new challenges, and you cannot shy away from the challenges. You have to face the challenges. You will face in a different way. You will adapt yourself. And how it looks like? HR structure will become more and more lean in the organizations. That is the model going to come in. Already it's happening. What I'm telling is not something new, but it will happen more intensely and in a very, very large scale. Less permanent jobs, obviously, more temporary and flexible jobs, part-time job sort of culture, just sort of practice will come into more and more, even into the manufacturing sector, where normally people are hired on permanent jobs. More innovative resource models, outsourced resource models will come into play. Survival of fittest is the single song in this kind of scenario. That's the only thing that will prevail upon. Entrepreneurs will opt to move away from secure investment to the secure investment models and change their business practices and make collaborations with other countries. They do not even hesitate moving the investment to other countries. Normally, India expects, for virtue of its cheap labor cost and other advantages, more investment to come in, but for fear of this kind of political uncertainties, people will like to, even the indigenous, the local entrepreneurs will like to move to other safer countries. That's the kind of contrast and a very, very drastic step that would come into. They produce less in India and consume more in India. And increase even to the extent that there could be huge exodus of manpower of all types of people, be it unorganized sector, be it skilled people, unskilled people, or the managerial talent. All this will flow out of India where they will have better opportunities. This is the kind of situation I am actually visualizing in the kind of environment setting in India today. Thank you.
Thank you, Trinath. I'm sure all of you here would have had your ears perked up with his opening remarks, where in a very, very succinct way, he explained all that is wrong. And I'm sure in the course of the discussion, you will have a lot of questions for him as to what can be the way out of this, what are the possible ways, because it's you guys who will really have to work on the ways out. Guys like us have gone now. We're going to go away very shortly, take our retirement pensions and hang up our boots and lay back with a gym and lime cordial. but it's you guys who will have to really work. So before Mr. Rohit Bhagat takes over, I just thought I'll mention that. Over to you, Mr. Bhagat.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to all. This is a very overwhelming pedestal, I must say. It's very, very good to sit here. It's also very intimidating. I can sense some very palpable intimidation in the hall. Is that because of Mr. Trinad's scary words about the economy and the job scope in the market today? Okay. Before I start, I'd just like to thank Professor Bala for having me here. It's very humbling to be here because I passed out around 7 kilometers away from this place. And I would say that academic thing was again corrupted in my mind when I got the theme and I came to all of you with a couple of notes with me, which I don't think I've made in the last 6-7 years. So I passed out from SMHRD around 7 years back, and I've done a bit of IR while I was with Aditya Birla Group. So last couple of days I was thinking about what do I talk about on this topic, which is more of IR, not such a glamorous domain anymore. So how many of you really want to hear about IR today? Yeah. Okay, so the backbenchers are raising their hands. That's very ironical, but that's very heartening to see. I got a few notes, and I can also talk about some of the experiences I had during my IR stint. But I would rather like, and that's my personal style of interacting with people, to make it more interactive. So I would like you to have a conversation with me rather than me having a monologue. So I picked a few cases of last couple of years, and what has been the trend and what has been the trend in the IR landscape in this country or globally. So I had few cases with me which talked about, I'll just read out and I won't go into the details of that. Toyota Kirloskar declares lockout at Bidadi plant. South Africa's lawn mine miners accept pay rise to end strike. For Honda, India is less risky than China. Haldia cargo handlers strike work. South Africa police retrieve weapons in raid on miners. Labor agitation stalls work at Howrah factory. Maruti sees 11% sales fall in FY 2012. How many of you are aware of the Maruti fiasco which happened? Can anyone give me some details about that, except for the fact that one of our HR colleague had to, he lost his life because of that. Any other facts on that? Who were the people who were caught? What are the magnitude of that incident which happened few months back, few quarters back? Anyone wish to talk more about it? Yeah, please.
The discrimination between contract workers and the regular workers. The difference in the wages they get. Like the permanent worker is getting 22,000 per month, and the contract worker is getting 9,000 per month. So that's the difference. It's basically HR failure.
And what was the fallout of that?
They didn't follow the rule rightly. That according to Company Act 1956, the contract workers and the regular workers should be treated equally. But most of the manufacturing industries didn't follow that.
So why do companies prefer to have contract workers? Do we need them?
In the name of cost cutting. That's the main reason.
Cost cutting, do you think contract workers are always paid less?
Yes, sir. Always contract workers get less in the manufacturing industry.
But what is the need to have contract workers if we are paying the same salary?
They are not the part of the organization. That's why you pay to them less.
Okay, that's a partially correct answer. Anyone else on the casualties which happened out of the Maruti fiasco? Around 24 people were grievously injured, and the Maruti CEO had to approach the Haryana Chief Minister for that. And it was one of the largest union strike or union disharmony which happened in this country in the last 40 years. The other two were one which happened in the Tata's premise. Anyone have any clue about that? The Tata fiasco which happened around 35 years back. Any HR IR student that we have here? Okay, so let me talk about my own experiences. I worked with Hindalco, which has around 8,000 workmen, total around 21,000 people working directly and indirectly on or off the payrolls of the organization. We did not have a strike for 39 years, and that was one of the records in this country's landscape. I remember just a few instances, and which might or might not be exactly relevant in today's context. But one of our engineers was kidnapped in a mine called Lohar Dagga, and our IR head was called there, and he was asked to sit on a brick, and he was asked to oblige with all the terms and conditions of this union, which was again a rebel union, as in they were not authorized, they were not recognized, which is another facet of union militancy, I could say, which used to exist in the earlier part of the years and which is resurfacing. So my IR head, who used to be a very powerful person, he was again asked to come and reconcile on behalf of the organization, and he did not budge for 48 hours. He was sitting on the brick, and he was asked to give up all the terms and conditions that the union were kind of clamoring for. But in the end, the management won, right? So in another instance, we had something related to the salary issues, wherein a lot of workers at the end of the day silently came and stood up outside the HR office. Around 500, 600, 1,000 of them every day at the end of the day. They used to come and club around our office, saying nothing, absolutely nothing. And then silently, we got to know that one of them was silently provoking the others. And what we did as a matter of fact is that we somehow got the man responsible for all the trouble out of the system, and we transferred him to some other location. So what I'm trying to say is that there have been conflicts, there have been pros and cons from the management, from the union side, which is very historical in nature. What is erupting these days is that, but these things have been mitigating over the last few years. So the cases of strikes, the cases of lockouts have been decreasing all throughout. But in last few months, last few couple of years actually, when things happened at Maruti, so this has taken a more modern approach. How many of you are aware of the Air India pilots strike? Can anyone tell me what is the larger business scheme behind that? And as in who is instigating the Air India pilots? And one of the major players, and I would not like to name that, has been insidiously instigating this Air India pilot so that his airline gets the maximum percentage out of the domestic as well as the international aviation. So that these things are taking more pragmatic approach these days. It's no more about simply militancy, which is again happening and which is a cause for concern, like Mr. Trinath just mentioned about. So, this kind of violent attack, especially on the personnel, on the management, on senior management of the organization, makes you feel very unsafe. There was another time when I was at, 5 years before I was at Hindalco Power, the entire HR department was surrounded by union workers who were partially or fully armed to a certain extent. So these situations can really test your nerves and can give you very, very bad sleepless nights. So thankfully those days are very few now, and those days are almost gone. But this IR thing, this conflict, like some of us mentioned, has taken a different dimension altogether. So now I would say it's no longer limited to just a union worker or a HR manager. It has extended to the management, it has extended to consumer. Now there are consumer forums as well. When I was in school 7 or 8 years back, one of my professors from TISS used to tell us that in the 1960s and 70s, and some of my mature colleagues and professors would know about it, that when Datta Sawant used to call one single strike in Mumbai, every cab across Mumbai used to stop. And remember, this was a time when there was no mobile, no pager, no Twitter or Facebook. That was the kind of influence that union leaders used to influence. But thankfully, we are out of those days, those archaic days are over. But yes, IR has been taking a different shape, which unfortunately is not very fruitful in the interest of the business, in the interest of the economy, in the interest of employment, because any kind of violent situation does not serve anyone well. So those are some of the snippets I wanted to talk about, I wanted to share with you people. And I got a bunch of notes, but I would rather not open them and let have free conversation happen in this grand hall. I'm really very overwhelmed with the size and the population of this hall and a bunch of very enthusiastic MBA students. So you can clap after I'm done, so that's fine. But I mean, no, I meant when I'm over. So if you have anything to discuss, anything to ask, I'm open.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bhagat. That was a very well kind of put out perspective, telling us about all the Machiavellian techniques that you use to deal with tough IR situations. And I'm now sure that lots of these young people here would want to ask you questions about how you really do that. So shall we start? Shall we throw open the discussion? Please.
Sir, as you said that the IR relations are evolving, so what would be the exact scenario today when there are no more unions, not that much kind of lockouts, other than the Maruti case? So what is the scenario these days in other industries? I mean, apart from the main basic manufacturing industries. What is the present scenario according to you? And what are the fallouts there?
See, like I said, it has not stopped, just that it has taken another dimension altogether. So there are seemingly there are lesser number of violent incidences like the one which happened in Maruti, and so there are more strategic nature of such IR issues which are coming up, like the one I mentioned about Air India. Even at workplaces, even at places where white collar workmen are more, like people like us, people like corporates, techies, engineers. Even at these places, there is a need to involve them more with us, right? So that's a need of the hour. So IR has taken shape. It has, and it is growing in a different stature, be it with technology workers, be it with the engineering workers. Just that shape is no more existent, except for a few cases like Maruti and Toyota Kirloskars. Add something?
Would you like to add something to this?
Please. No, myself.
Yeah.
See, one thing I can tell for sure is that if the state of affairs continues like this, if you remember why we are relatively better situation in the last 15 years to 20 years is because of the globalization. LPG we call it. Liberalization, privatization, globalization. Correct? Way back, economic reforms instituted by Manmohan Singh during P.V. Narasimha Rao's government, that sort of things. So thereafter it has taken a HR shape. So the employers were more receptive, they have changed their perception, they have given extra value to the human factor in the running of business. So that has actually given a lot of relief, and today we are relatively finding a less IR scenario. Okay, that's the way unions have actually lost their grip also to a large extent, because unions used to fight for give me this things, and employers are saying that I am ready to give this, provided you partner with me in whatever way you can do it. So that has come to a kind of consensus sort of thing, and over a period of time people also recognized. Now, the economy is pushing the business to the worst levels. This is where the employers will again change their mind now. So they have to go on cost cutting sort of things, and they will invent more and more newer ways of bringing down cost. Unfortunately, in bringing down cost, you close an industry, machinery is not going to question you. Okay? Or anything. Assets will not claim. Immovable property, all these things. The human beings, they have a mouth. They cry a lot. And in this, the only thing they know is that confrontation. So IR is going to repeat. This is the worry, biggest worry coming into mind now. Will the IR days, industrial unrest, repeat in India, and all kind of these things? When you are happy, you will not raise your mouth, as simple as this. And today, the happy days are going and turning towards gloomy things. The big fear setting in is that, will IR repeat? If it repeats, again, we have to live in the ages of 1970s and 80s. We know the way how to live in that also, but it will be painful to take that kind of position. And that should, I don't mean that the current state is going to that grave extent, but there are definitely it will have a share, and IR is going to come again, is what is the prediction coming into the mind.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, to sum up really what the refrain of both has been, that over the past 15 or 20 years, when there was a season of plenty, all the requirements of the workforce or employees was really taken care of because there was plenty to share. However, with reducing business, reducing margins, and the expectations going up, that is going to take a little bit of a downturn, and that's probably going to be the cause of friction.
Yes.
Right? So does that answer your question? Very good. Next question, please. Yeah.
Yes, sir. My name is Ashish Line. Sir, sir, you have mentioned all the mentioned negative facts about the Indian economics and plus politics. Sir, what I want to know that what make turn around in the this scenario, if you think of political strategy, what can be the solution for that?
Yeah, this question to me? Yeah. See, if I were to be in a position to answer that question, I would be nothing less than Prime Minister of India. Definitely I will claim that.
I think you would be the UPA chairman.
Oh, great. It is further great. See, there is no definite answers, but one thing. See, let's not blame any government or political party also. I think people will take a lesson now. With the things worsening, they will also not keep quiet. See, the election mandates we see, suddenly, unexpectedly, some party comes surprisingly and proves majority. People, everybody expecting I will come into power, this thing, somebody else comes. This all happened. So people are very, very dicey and unpredictable. I think someday it will change actually. There will be some stable government that would come in. People out of suffering will definitely change their stand and bring in some kind of political stability in the country is what I am actually optimistically looking at the situation. But it may not happen so soon because the pain has just now begun. Pain, we have not really taken the pain of it. It has to go in a big journey. My view is that it will take some more years. I don't know exactly when it will happen. We have no answers on how the political behaviors will be, all these things. But okay, in a democratic situation like ours, where in fact in India we feel that we have an extra democracy, I should say. So in that scenario, these things are quite difficult to predict it, but one day solution will come. I don't think such a major political reforms could come in India.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
Sir, what are the lessons should we learn from the Maruti case?
What are the lessons from the Maruti fiasco? I actually have a very ready-made answer for that. I got 4 points to your question.
Good.
This is like instant khichdi.
Yeah.
You know?
And I like the hooting part. It reminisces me of my campus days. So thanks for hooting there. So there are 4 distinct points talking in the academic lingo. One is that contract labor is just indicative of the larger issues. Which means that, I think one of you mentioned about the contract labor part, right? So one of the reasons why we are forced to adopt to the contract labor part is because termination in India is a very tricky situation. Right, and in that sense, we are even more archaic than Pakistan for that matter. In Pakistan, unless you are terminating around 50% of your workers and employees, you don't have to get any legal permission. With our case, it's very different. You know, even for terminating one single person, there are tens of laws that you need to cross over. So that's one reason why contract labor has to be employed, to kind of safeguard yourself or your organization against this legal system. So the contract labor thing will remain. So that is one of the reasons and one of the lessons from the Maruti part that something has to be done about these laws and regulations of the Indian labor laws, right? The second point from my notes, and I quote, the need to use a more mature approach to industrial relations. So actually one of the unions which caused this entire anarchy or this violent situation was not the one recognized. So, so there's a definite need from the management and from the union to understand that gone are the days when you can afford such a lockout, when you can afford such a strike or such a close down of operations. Neither are we in that stage of economy, nor are there shortage of labor. So a more matured approach has to be put into the place. The third lesson from the Maruti fiasco is that you need to be more proactive and involve your workers more than that you used to be. Now that might mean that you actually get them, like Mr. Trinath said, that you need to partner with them. So get them more involved in your own decision making, in your own union agreements. Make them, incentivize them more and more for their work, so that they also have some kind of lock-in system wherein they can't move out and they can't become violent one fine morning and say that from today we are not going to work or we are going to work at half the pace. So that's the third part, that you need to be more proactive. And the fourth part is the ability to handle and resolve a business conflict is a business requirement. Like I mentioned in some of the earlier snippets, is that today none of the organizations can afford it. Maruti had to suffer around 180 crores in one of its quarters just because of this sales down, which happened due to this entire union thing. So now the organization need to understand, and the workers will also understand, with this disinvestment coming in, FDI thing coming in, the shortage of labor is no more there. So everyone has their own stakes in it, not to resort to such violent activities. So I would say these are the four major learnings from the Maruti scenario.
Sir, my question is that we've been talking about policy paralysis.
We can't see you.
I'm here.
Can you raise your hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We've been talking about policy paralysis, but then what kind of policies do, in the present economic times, do we need in order to bring in more efficient growth for the businesses? What kind of policies do we want, and what can be done to make it more efficient in terms of implementation?
See, the answer is very simple. In a context where not a single decision could be taken by the government, which will impact the society positively, economy positively, everything is known to us. I'll give an example of since he is talking more on the IR front of it. The Industrial Relations Bill. Have anybody heard of this Industrial Relations Bill? There was an amendment to Industrial Disputes Act way back in the 80s. I'm talking about 30 years back. It was a fantastic bill prepared. It was to see its light in every government coming into power. He's talking about you can't dismiss a person, you can't terminate a person. That facilitate, that has a solution in some degree to that. That will give a lot of flexibility for the employers to man over the employment. No government has courage to take it. Simply, if that comes in, the government is sure to fall. I'm talking about an extreme case. Okay. No government should work for falling. Government is supposed to stand, then only that should happen. Talk about the case of this, today the stock market, the economy is all of this. Is the government able to take any proactive measures? On oil, could we exercise control? We know the solutions. Government wants to withdraw the subsidy. Could it do it? Industrial policy. FDI, we talked about it. Few months back, there was a very big move from the government. They boldly initiated. Every party in the alliance itself has put their caps down, and obviously the opposition, all these things. Government threatened. They simply moved it and saw that. The reaction was fierce. They kept quiet. So somewhere it calls for economy at every point of time what steps it calls for, that should be taken. Then only it can move on. Like if you are suffering from ill health, we take the medicine on the day, otherwise it turns into cancer. It could be a kind of, it's a bigger disease. Before it turns into, before it takes away your life, you take steps. The same thing happens to the economy also. Government is in a political paralysis. I don't blame them, let me tell you. Because when I'm running a government with 10 parties, all the 10 parties have to agree for it. And that will never happen in the current situation. So their helps. Leave about the opposition, leave apart. Maybe left to one government, one single strong party, that time possibly the political paralysis will be lesser. That time they require courage, a little bit of boldness and sort of thing. If that is not there, even then also it will not happen. I'm not talking about it. That's the kind of thing. What decisions are taken? I have said, why new decisions? Not even the existing policies and industries. I tell you an example. Few months back, the entire industry forum has met the Prime Minister of India. What was the reaction? Has anybody followed the news? Including Ambani's other people, Ratan Tata, all these people, the icons of industry, have gone to represent their fate. Has anything happened on that day? Because manaya gaya tha, they were told that just bear with and try to help yourself. I'm again not blaming the Prime Minister. He is constrained. What's the message the industry receives? Investment receives it. This is an example.
Yeah. So in other words, unless and until you have progressive developments that happen, strife is inevitable. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. I'm Vivek Yadav, student manager of BIIB. Sir, my question is, sir, as India is still facing the problem of current account deficit, what are the strategy adopted by export and import industry to handle it, sir?
This is a finance-dominated institute, so that's why we are having more questions related
No problem.
to that.
Welcome, welcome. Everything is centered around finance. Come, I didn't get your question.
Go ahead.
Please.
Sir, India is still facing the problem of current...
Distance. Okay.
Sorry.
You are too dominant.
Sir, India is still facing the problem of current account deficit. What are the strategies adopted by export and import industry to handle it?
I
think his voice should be that of
no,
the
not voice. I understood it. I'm actually not prepared to answer this question. I don't have much financial knowledge. I will not be able to take this question. If you Rohit, if you
Rohit, you might like to attempt it.
No, I'm just saying that we are not from the PMO office, so
okay.
neither we are PM advisors.
Okay.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
Sir, my question is to Trinad, sir. Sir, can you please tell us how the technological breakthroughs has brought radical changes in HR management?
Sorry, can you please repeat that?
Sir,
This is a question to me?
yes, sir.
Okay, please.
Sir, how the technological breakthroughs has brought radical changes in HRM?
Technological breakthroughs
Yes.
have brought changes in HR.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
That's
what
a
she
very-
means is computerization.
Yeah, the answer is very simple. See, it's a very good question. Let me appreciate it first of all. I mean, we should praise her for raising this question. My first response to this is that we all owe a lot of things to the IT industry. Until the IT industry emerged in India and world over, the HR, the true HR, what we are now today talking, has not happened in India. It was all predominantly industrial relations, labor welfare, personal management at best. We all know the routine way of doing things, how to take people, how to manage them, how to give them salary, sort of these things, time of routine, mundane functions only. The IT industry has first time brought a dimension of unionless work culture. To keep them, IT has first brought in a systematic, orderly working of everything capturing in a kind of systematic way, recruitment to separation, a procedural things. They brought in a manual system, number one. Number two, IT has brought in a lot of technology, computers infusing all these things. The way of doing it, things, more we used to do it, everything you have to use a form. IT has invented a way that you don't require to use a form. You probably a communication can go, and emails can go, sort of these things. Many They have simplified these things. Technological infusion into the very administrative, that's the human resource function, personal function, they brought in, number 2. Number 3, the reward structure, all these things, IT industry has revolutionized it, saying that you reward for performance. So that has actually killed the unionism in the IT industry. People are ready, companies ready to pay, provided you are able to establish your this thing. So person-specific salaries have come with IT industry. These are all the HR dimensions. And recognizing competency framework we talk, performance management system, succession planning, all these things. Where are the roots for these things? We were all talking about it quite for some decades. We could never really work on them. So IT industry has enabled it, and fortunately, the rest of the industry has also taken it in good spirit and tried to imitate it and further work upon, customize it to their requirement, manufacturing, service, infrastructure, all these things. Today, the HR has emerged with a new face out of this traditional personal management working with a blend of IT brought-in practices. This is my response to your question.
Thank you.
I'm Harish Kumar from BIMM. So my question is, as you...
Let's hear the question. Can you please restrict the in-between conversations, please, so that we can hear him? Thank you.
Sir, as you much talked about the economic systems and FDIs, so nowadays we are seeing that government taking steps for easing out regulations like on tariffs and easing regulation on corporate governance tax from 20% to 5%, and also like steps like establishment of innovation research universities. So in light of these, while going through today's newspaper, I read that Germany had eased out its regulation for residence bill for foreigners by providing them with the blue cards, which will facilitate them with permanent resident authorization, which is updation from green card in 2000. So this will result to help them to attract more corporate people who are skilled people and students. So in light of this, what are the steps that Indian government and industry is taking so that foreigners come here and boost out our economy?
Yeah, I'm sure Srinath will answer this question, but the short answer to your question is something like this. All the things that we are talking of, FDI, sit down, please sit down, FDI and others are essentially to stimulate growth in the economy and to kickstart, or as our very honorable Prime Minister once in a while when he gets his tongue says, to release the animal spirits. Okay. However, this sort of a thing that you're talking of Germany doing is there in many, many countries. For example, in the US, if you can find $500,000 and can provide employment to 8 people, you can get what is known as fast-track citizenship, which happens within 6 months. And it's been there for a long time. It's not something that's new. Similarly, we have also tried to do stuff like overseas Indian citizens and the dual citizenship and stuff like that. But as both of them have sort of repeatedly said, part of the problem is the inability of political parties or the ruling coalition to push through some of these things that are required because they simply cannot get their allies and, of course, the opposition to around it. But I'm sure he'll add much more to it. Please.
I think Mr. Sacker has rightly said it. The problem is not that we don't have ideas. We have plenty of ideas. Not one less than any other country in the world. Problem is that we have the incompetencies. The system, the state of affairs is today, they're not comfortable in doing it. The system is throwing, the political system is democratic, system itself is throwing a big challenge to us. Our democracy has become a curse to us at the moment, if we see that. Over democracy, all these things. There is no discipline in that. So that is making too many parties to come up, mushroom growth of political parties, and with some kind of presence, all these things, everyone's short. Process, what's happening is no one is actually concerned or otherwise showing seriousness for the betterment of the economy. At the cost of economy, everyone is actually fighting for their own survival. That is a state of affairs. So with the result, ideas are plenty are there. Why? If political parties are not there, if it is left to the bureaucrats, they will give you hundreds and thousands of ideas. All intellectuals are available in India. Ideas are not a dearth. You talked about an idea in Germany, how to promote talent from outside the country. That such kind of ideas can be done in India also. But where is the will? That is the problem here. It's not about the idea, it's about a will problem. Say again?
But sir, don't you think that it's not appropriate to blame only political parties for all these?
No, it should be. The people should be blamed first, if you ask me. For choosing that kind of parties or all these things, no? We should be blamed. That's why I mentioned a little while before, that time will come, but it takes a lot of time. I do not know when. But one day, when the things go to the rock bottom level, it will emerge. Revolutions are coming that way only. Revolution comes by. Revolution cannot happen in a happy society. Okay? Same thing. When we go to that bottom line, bottom level, definitely that will come. But who knows when it will happen.
Organizations have their own culture. So how do organizations manage to be politically correct and avoid ugly IR incidents?
That's a fit question for Rohit Bhagat, I'm sure.
Sir, I got 3 years of IR experience in my whole career. Okay, let me try answering that. Very, very true that most of the unions have political connections, and you need to be very subtle with them, or you could be really outrooted. The only way, and I would not say that you go and just trot their ways like it used to be happening in few years back. I can talk about the experiences I have seen, as in how do you manage unions, multiple unions being backed by multiple political parties, and yet manage a harmony in your own factory or organization or an office. So there are different ways. One is that you give prominence to a particular union which you think is the most politically connected, or which is the strongest one. And I might smell motivated here or manipulative here when I respond to your question here. So the union which is the strongest, which has the most powerful backup, and which is the recognized one. If it is not recognized one, please recognize that and understand that that is a union which is going to play the cards. So you can't afford to have to be at loggerheads with them. So that is one of the submissive ways of doing it. The other way is to ignore that. So I know that you belong to a particular political party which is doing a lot of vandalism in Mumbai and in Maharashtra nowadays in recent 2 years, and then you take a stand and you say that I'm not going to deal with you. I don't even recognize your union, because I already have a credible union system which has been there for 10, 20, 30, 40 odd years now, and I'm going to deal only with that, because that is the only registered union that we have with our organization. When you take that stand, you are politically correct, you are lawfully correct, and you can deal with that, because you know that with that union you have been dealing in a more peaceful manner. But yes, you also run the risk of enraging the other union which you think is politically more powerful. But here is where organization culture comes into play. If you like, I remember Mr. Birla often used to tell, and I worked for Birlas for more than 5 years. He used to say that, and this is. And I quote him, he said that we would rather grow at 1 to 2% lesser than what we planned for, but we would not compromise on our integrity. So that is the stand that Mr. Birla took. I can also quote some more, like Toyota has this policy that in any part of the country, of the world that we operate in, the utmost priority is that Toyota's culture is established and is followed and is respected by the local people. So of course you have to maintain that sensitivity to the local customs, the local political connections. Your culture, they are very clear about integrity, and Mr. has always been a very big advocate of this fact that he will not budge when it comes to any kind of pressures, and he will not succumb to any inkling of an indiscipline. So here I would, and that's a very relevant question that you have asked. There are means and there are ways to resort to a union, I would say, power twisting. But again, if it falls out of your culture of the organization, that's where you need to take a decision. So I can't prescribe that, when you have a powerful union, just go and bow to them, or you completely take them at loggerheads and be in a conflicting situation with them. It again depends on the culture of the organization and the history and the legacy of that organization. So I would say it's very, very peculiar to the organization and the political situation in that location, that geography. It could be a region, it could be a country, it could be a, say, Asia Pac or a Europe. So Eastern Europe is very different from Central Europe vis-a-vis Western Europe.
It's technically perfect answer, absolutely, right? It's a little like, but ultimately the drift of it is that whatever be your interest, as long as there is a commonality of interest, you work and you live together, just like though men are from Mars and women are from Venus, they do exist. And in fact, even cohabit very happily till features draw them apart. Next question. He doesn't need a mic. He doesn't need a mic.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, government has given 51% share in the hand of foreign direct investment in multi-retail brand. Has government has done right or wrong, sir?
We are not having a political discourse here, so neither an economic conclave.
See,
we can talk in terms of people, the IR, the HR.
Essentially, we are talking of economic and government policy here. That I think is beyond the realm of this discussion. However, the short answer again to that is that it is a good thing done under certain circumstances. But I'm sure many of us here know that even in the state of New York, in the US of A, there is no Walmart. There is no Walmart. So it happens. Last two questions, please. I think both of them have gone to great lengths to explain, in fact, if we have a surplus of regulation of anything. So one more regulatory authority is only going to screw up the economy and us further. So for God's sake, please do not talk of more regulation, talk of less regulation. Okay? Yeah. One last question. Yes?
The person who is heading the Air India is an IS officer. So the person, the best...
but he's already retired now. Yeah.
He's retired now.
Yes.
The best person who is suited for the Air India to be the person like Rohit Bhatia, who is heading Indigo Airline, and the Captain Gopinath, who is the former founder of Air Deccan. So don't you think the government should appoint the person who is best suited for the job?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Who heads the BCCI? Is he a cricketer? Who heads the Badminton Authority of India? Who heads the Football Association of India? Who heads the Olympic Association of India? Someone from your town? Right? So these are very correct, very contemporary questions that you and me or Mr. Trinath or the professors here would like to debate upon, talk about. But these are endless questions. You and me can have conversations around it.
Sure, I think we should take some of these offline. I've just got a note saying that we are running half an hour late and therefore can be summarized. And I do believe in obliging any reasonable request that comes. So therefore, yes, I think we had an excellent discussion. Thank you very, very much.